SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Comfort Moody in Bagyai Kalak Pavatina Alut Penumai.
Tonight, clearing the air. People's Bank responds to its Chinese blacklist.
Once the matter at the courts is settled, we'll be taking necessary action to honour our obligation under this transaction.
As the Agriculture Department defends its testing prowess.
Sri Lankan plant quarantine has a very good laboratory to cater all these type of laboratory tests.
New thinking for the new normal. Interprovincial travel to be allowed from early Sunday morning as the government ponders the need for vaccine cards. Not so fast. Fully vaccinated Sri Lankans to be allowed UK entry, but not if you've got the Sinopharm jab. Irrational move. The central bank says that it suspects Moody's downgrade to not be driven by economic considerations. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Friday, the 29th of October, 2021.
Nelly මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shiny කෙස් කලඹක රහස sunsilk black shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Kanai. Now, the Chinese embassy in Colombo today blacklisted the People's Bank of Sri Lanka over what it terms a vicious letter of credit default. It is the latest development in the fertilizer row with China, which has escalated over the last few weeks, relating to a Chinese fertilizer shipment being rejected by the island over the presence of harmful bacteria. The People's Bank of Sri Lanka, however, responded, saying that a recent court order has effectively tied their hands when it comes to honouring the relevant letter of credit. The country's main opposition, the Samagi Janabalawege, meanwhile, sees further trouble ahead, saying that it's best that the matter is resolved quickly before China's central bank gets involved.
In the latest development in the China-Sri Lanka fertilizer saga, the Economic and Commercial Office of the Chinese Embassy in Colombo blacklisted the People's Bank of Sri Lanka over its failure to make the due payment in compliance with the relevant letter of credit. Issuing a statement on Wednesday, the embassy said that the People's Bank has what it termed a vicious letter of credit default, which has caused huge losses to Chinese companies in international trade in Sri Lanka. Blacklisting the bank, the embassy requested all Chinese-funded enterprises to strengthen risk prevention and control, avoid accepting letters of credit issued by the bank in trade with Sri Lanka in order to eliminate trade risks. The blacklisting comes at a time when the Commercial High Court had issued an enjoining order against China-based Qingdao Sewin Biotech, its local agent and the People's Bank. Enjoining order delivered last Friday prevents the People's Bank from making any payment under a letter of credit opened in favour of the Chinese company or its local agent. Issuing a response on the blacklisting, the People's Bank of Sri Lanka, however, said that the temporary delay in processing the payment is solely due to the bank's obligation as a responsible corporate citizen to be bound by the relevant injunction order.
The Economic and Commercial Council of the Embassy of China has blacklisted People's Bank for default. I would like to place on record that an enjoining order has been received preventing the bank from honouring its obligation under a letter of credit opened by the bank. Once the matter at the courts is settled, we will be taking necessary action to honour our obligation under this transaction. We have already intimated our stand on this matter to the Embassy of China.
Meanwhile, also weighing in on the matter, Samagi Janabalawege parliamentarian Dr. Harsha De Silva says that the matter should be resolved immediately before the Central Bank of China gets involved in the issue.
The Chinese embassy has blacklisted the People's Bank in the embassy. I don't know to what extent that is enforceable by the Chinese central bank, but it is certainly a warning that this matter needs to be resolved. And if People's Bank is saying, look, we can't do anything about it because there is an injunction against us on paying this money to the Chinese company, how that is going to be resolved with the Chinese party is another matter, because this is an international transaction that they have entered into and not a local one. If they don't resolve it at this point, and by any chance if get taken up at the level of the Chinese central bank, and the Chinese central bank then through their mechanisms blacklist People's Bank of Sri Lanka in China, then that becomes a serious matter, because the bulk of our imports come from China, and there certainly will be a contagion effect if People's Bank will then spread to other banks, both state and private. And it may spread from China to other countries of the world. So not only we will have a problem of dollars in importing food and medicines and everything else that are essential, on top of that, our LCs will not be accepted anywhere. So we are heading into a grave disaster. This needs to be resolved immediately.
Big 3.
In the meantime, Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Ajantha De Silva, denies allegations of conducting a hasty test on the Chinese fertilizer samples. Speaking to First at 9, he highlighted that the standard practice as per the International Plant Protection Convention was followed in testing. He also rejected the necessity to perform a third-party test.
Sri Lanka's fertilizer issue hit another bump in the road last month after the National Plant Quarantine Service found high levels of bacteria in a shipment of Chinese-manufactured organic fertilizer that was supposed to be sterile. Following the revelation, a shipment of over 12,000 metric tons manufactured by Kindau Sivin Biotech Group and dispatched to Sri Lanka was rejected by the importer Ceylon Fertilizer Company based on the test reports. This resulted in a diplomatic response from China, with its embassy in Colombo calling the National Plant Quarantine Service decision hasty and lacking scientific basis. The embassy also alleged that the NPQS had tested the fertilizer samples for bacteria after only 3 days, despite the International Plant Convention requiring testing to be carried out after 6 days. Offering a clarification on the matter, Director General of the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Ajantha De Silva, denied this and confirmed that all necessary IPPC guidance were followed, with testing taking place after 7 days, despite officials suspecting the presence of Erwinia within 3 days. Dr. De Silva also explained why Sri Lanka should not allow a third-party test report, as is now being requested by Kindau Sivin Biotech.
Under the IPPC regulation, usually the National Plant Quarantine Service of any country has been given the permission to carry out their operation and to do the laboratory testing based on the facilities and all that, and to give the recommendation for any sort of issues regarding plant quarantine. So therefore, Sri Lankan plant quarantine also has a very good laboratory to cater all these type of laboratory tests. And we are working with many countries in the world. So therefore, I don't think there is any necessity to go for another independent laboratory and get those test results and do our operation.
Further responding to Kindau Sivin's recent claims that Sri Lanka's NPQS failed to share its test report and methodology, Dr. De Silva explained that the NPQS is only obligated to share its documents with China's Plant Quarantine Service and not with the manufacturer.
NPQ of Sri Lanka should give any sort of a clarification to the China NPQ. For courtesy, we can give for any other party, but there is no mandatory requirement for the NPQ to elaborate anything. But in this case, we have even gone very further on this one, and we have issued the way that we have done everything to the National Fertilizer Secretariat, and I know they have even shared the way that the NPQ has done the test. Methodologies for these type of tests is usually a standard test. If you say the potato, carrot test or whatever, so everybody knows, those who are dealing with pathology. Like that, we have already informed what the test was.
Dr. De Silva also explained that any concerns on the testing process needs to be raised by China's National Plant Quarantine Service, and added that so far no communications in this regard have been received.
the Sri Lankan NPTU has already sent the non-compliant report to NPTU, and China has to reply on that. So that correspondence are going on. They have not any indicated regarding the way that the laboratory was operating, anything on this regard.
Meanwhile, farmers are continuing to protest the lack of chemical fertilizer and demanding an immediate solution. In contrast, however, farmers in Kabitigol in Anuradhapura have decided to begin their farming activities, putting their trust in the government's organic drive. Accordingly, in Trincomalee, it is reported that a total of 25,000 acres of paddy fields are being prepped for cultivation.
Outgoing US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Lena B. Teplitz, called for a strengthening of US-Sri Lanka ties, saying that despite disagreements on certain issues, Sri Lanka and the United States share a common love for democratic ideals. The US envoy added that keeping communication lines open despite differing views is the only way bilateral ties can be enhanced and a better relationship built.
Sri Lanka is a magnificent country. It's been an honor to serve as ambassador here, and there's so much that I'll miss. It's those people-to-people ties in business, in government, civil society, and in our daily lives that sustain the relationship. They have also helped us work through some of the most difficult moments of the last few years, including the Easter attacks and COVID-19, events that have weighed heavily on us all. The people of the United States and Sri Lanka have a lot in common. As democracies with 70 years of shared history, we strive to promote and protect essential democratic principles, like the rule of law, inclusive governance, and freedom of expression. The United States has partnered closely with the government to promote Sri Lanka's prosperity and sovereignty, and to strengthen the private sector and people-to-people ties. Over the past 20 years, U.S. assistance to Sri Lanka has totaled more than $1 billion, and we continue to identify new areas of cooperation. We've been a generous partner during the challenging times of the COVID-19 pandemic. The United States has provided almost $18 million to Sri Lanka to aid in its fight against COVID-19, in addition to contributing over 2.4 million vaccines donated at no cost to the Sri Lankan people. For all these common goals and investments, we do sometimes disagree, but diplomacy's essence is to keep talking and to keep working together through our challenges. We need that open communication and ability to work through areas where we may not have full agreement to keep the bilateral relationship on a good trajectory. We shall extend the arc of our two democratic nations' partnership far into the future, I have no doubt.
Now then, fully vaccinated eligible travellers from Sri Lanka will be allowed to travel to the UK from next Monday. However, the UK has only approved 4 vaccines, namely Oxford AstraZeneca, Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna and Janssen. Sri Lanka's most widely used jab, the China-manufactured Sinopharm vaccine, however, is not among the approved list of jabs. Travellers should show proof of a complete course of one of the approved vaccines, a vaccine certificate, for example, at least 14 days prior to arrival in the UK. Formulations of the 4 approved vaccines, such as AstraZeneca Covishield, Moderna Takeda, also qualify as approved vaccines. Before travelling to the UK, fully vaccinated travellers must complete a passenger locator form in the 48 hours before arrival and book and pay for a COVID-19 test to be taken before the end of day 2. We will see you shortly after this break. Stay with us.
මිලියන 18.8 නිවස ලක්ෂ 5ක් ගෙවා දැන්ම වෙන් කරවා ගන්න මල්බෙරි රෙසිඩන්ස්.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control today announced that inter-provincial travel restrictions will be lifted on Sunday, the 31st of October at 4 a.m. During the meeting, it was also decided to look into the possibility of making the carrying of vaccine cards mandatory in public.
For over a month, Sri Lanka's new daily COVID cases have stayed under 1,000, hovering around the 500 mark. Taking the situation into consideration, the authorities are taking measures to revise the quarantine guidelines, easing some of the restrictions and restoring normalcy to daily life. To that end, several key decisions were made after the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control convened today under the patronage of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. One of the prominent decisions made during the meeting was to lift the prevailing inter-provincial travel restrictions on Sunday the 31st of October at 4 am. Further, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asala Gunawardena said during the meeting that the necessary health guidelines have been issued to start the GCE ordinary level and advanced level classes at all schools. As such, the President pointed out that the principals should be made aware of the decision and the schools should restart as soon as possible. It was also decided to immediately look into the possibility of making the carrying of vaccination cards compulsory when entering public places such as shops and restaurants. Health officials stated that there are legal provisions under the COVID-19 related law to enforce it against those who decline vaccination, and that the Attorney General's advice in this regard has also been sought. Meanwhile, on the vaccine rollout, provincial health directors informed the President of various false propaganda carried out by certain groups to hamper the vaccination process. As such, the head of state instructed the Inspector General of Police to immediately look into the various organized groups, including in social media, which are trying to create unnecessary fear among the public about vaccination. In the meantime, Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga pointed out the need to take a number of new decisions with regard to the resumption and revival of the country's tourism sector. As the island's COVID situation sees a sustained easing, complacency comes with it. Disregarding health guidelines put in place to prevent another surge of the virus would only threaten the gains the country made at the cost of economic ruin in some cases and life in others.
දෛනිකව තාමත් 500කට වැඩි රෝගීන් සංඛ්‍යාවක් වාර්තා වෙනවා. ඒ නිසා රටේ ජනතාව සමහර අය වගකීමකින් තොර කටයුතු කෙරුවොත් වැඩිවීමේ අවදානම තියෙන 500 1500 වෙන එක බොහොම පහසුවෙන් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපි වගකීම් රහිතව කටයුතු කෙරුවොත්. ඒ නිසා මුව ආවරණය පැළඳීම සහ සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂිත ක්‍රමවේද පිළිපැදීම ඉතාමත්ම වැදගත් වෙනවා.
Moving on with other local stories, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka announced that it had been able to successfully complete the process of developing and testing blockchain technology-based shared Know Your Customer and proof of concept with involvement of 10 local banks. The move is intended to enhance customer access to financial services and adopt digital financial services. But the Central Bank itself concedes that regulation of Fintech is no easy task, as they question the financial authority and oversight of institutions.
All around the world, various financial technologies are being developed and adopted at a rapid pace. The latest topic gaining much attention is the use and adoption of cryptocurrencies. Similarly, in Sri Lanka, an expert committee was appointed to report to the cabinet on rules and regulations to attract the investments on blockchain technology and cryptocurrency mining. And yesterday, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka announced that it had successfully completed the process of developing and testing a blockchain technology-based Share Your Customer and Proof of Concept. The purpose of developing a blockchain technology-based proof of concept of an industry-wide shared Know Your Customer process is to assess the potential to improve customer experience, lower operational costs, and reduce the operational risk of banks and other financial institutions. It is expected that digitalization of the Know Your Customer process, especially with user-friendly and secure designs, would encourage customers to use digital financial services and increase their access to financial services. However, regulators are faced with issues related to monitoring brought on by decentralized financial technologies that have been developed. Speaking at a webinar recently on the topic of digital financial transformation, the Director of the Payments and Settlements Division at the Central Bank highlighted the issues confronted by regulators with regard to fintechs.
So if we go through this, the greater competition having with these fintech products and the services due to the rapid technology adaptation by major firms and also by the startups mainly. So that leads to the consumer choices based on the convenience of such products and services. The consumers are always, I think, selecting the convenience of the use of these products. So these products are getting popular among the citizens and the tech companies because we have broad range of financial services which we can access and deliver to the digital channels, including the payments, credit, savings, and remittances and insurance. So these sectors are, I think, almost we are using at present in the digital payment ecosystem. As a central bank, it is our responsibility to facilitate adoption of such finance services after guaranteeing that those adoption do not cause instability of the finance system. So there's a major concern we are having. Also, we need to ensure that the individuals are protected and well aware of the use of these products. So we know that if the products are, I think, enough in our market, and there are many other products in having for the payment system or use payment digital system, but the people are not using, then there's a problem with getting the awareness of these products. In the other case, that the rise in the fintech have raised concern of the financial authorities, and as a regulator, So we can expect more unseen challenges in the future. Something like whether we need to expand the regulatory and supervisory cycle to get supervising or the on-site supervision on these fintech products. And also we have to consider the new types of digital finance services fit into the existing regulation.
Now then, speaking at a ceremony to launch a housing project for Easter attack victims held at St. Lucia's Cathedral, Kotahena, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa stated that the government is duty-bound to do right by everyone affected. While admitting that there were some delays in the government's response towards the victims of the bombings, the Premier pledged to ensure such a situation never happens again in Sri Lanka and will create a country where people of all faiths can live in and practice their faith freely.
බෝම්බ ප්‍රහාරයෙන් විපතටපත් ජනතාව වෙනුවෙන් අපි රජයක් වශයෙන් කළ යුතු යුතුකම අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඉටු කරනවා. අතින් යමාරුට ප්‍රමාදයක් නැති වෙන්න ඇති. මොකද අපි දන්නවා ත්‍රස්තවාදී පැටකාපු පිරිස මොනතරම් ඒ පවුල් මොනතරම් තත්ත්වයක ඉන්නවද කියන එක. මේ වගේම ඉදිරියේදී එවැනි තත්ත්වයක් ඇති නොවන්න වග බලා ගන්න මේ රජය පියවර ගන්නවයි කියන එක මතක් කළ යුතුව තියෙනවා. ජනතාවට නිදහසේ ජීවත් වෙන්න, ගම්බිමන් යන්න, තමන්ගේ ආගම ඇදීම සඳහා පල්ලිය පන්සලට අයිතිය තිබිය යුතුයි. එමනම් ඒ සඳහා ගත යුතු සියලු පියවරන් ගැනීම රජයක වගකීමක්, අපේ වගකීමක් වශයෙන් අපි සලකමු. මේ විශේෂයෙන්ම අතිඋතුම් රංජිත් මැල්කම් කාදිනල්තුමා නිතර හමු වෙච්ච අවස්ථාවලදී මතක් කරන එක කාර්යයක් තමයි එදා පාස්කු ප්‍රහාරයෙන් පීඩනයට පත්වෙච්ච පිරිස් වෙනුවෙන් රාජ්‍යයක් විසින් කළ යුතු යුතුකම් ඉටු කරන ලෙස. ඒ නිසා ඒ නිවාසලාභීන්ට නිවාස ලබා දීමේ වැඩපිළිවෙලත් අපි ක්‍රියාත්මක කරගෙන යනවා කියලා කළ යුතු තියෙනවා. රටක් වෙනුවෙන්, ජාතියක් වෙනුවෙන් අපි මේ සියලු දෙනා එකමුතුයි අපි කටයුතු කරන්න ඕනේ.
We will see you once more on the other side of this break. Bear with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now then, export earnings for September fell just short of the $1 billion mark to stay at 995.8 million. In addition, numbers for the first 9 months of the year are also promising, with earnings up by 19.3% to stand at $8.8 billion so far.
Sri Lanka's merchandise exports in September 2021 were recorded at $995.8 million, according to customs data. This resulted in a third quarter 2021 earnings increase of 5% to $3.182 billion year-on-year. Merchandise exports in the January to September 2021 period also increased by 19.3% to $8.881 billion year-on-year, following increased exports of apparels and textiles, tea, rubber-based products, coconut-based products, electronics and electronic components, spices and concentrates, seafood, and ornamental fish. Of this, earnings from apparel and textile exports increased by 18.5% to $3.879 billion during the first 9 months of 2021. Meanwhile, export earnings from tea increased by 7.29% to $986.56 million during the January to September 2021 period, compared with the corresponding period of 2020. In parallel, export earnings from rubber and rubber finished products increased by 37.19% to $805.06 million through January to September, compared with the same period last year, which was attributed to higher exports of industrial and surgical gloves and pneumatic and retreated rubber tires and tubes. Further, export earnings from coconut and coconut-based products for the first 9 months of 2021 expanded by 24.14% to $608.76 million compared to the same period last year. Meanwhile, earnings from export of electrical and electronic components also recorded an increase of 25.75% to $309.62 million from January to September. Earnings from spices and essential oils too increased by 36.78% to $320.8 million through January to September compared to last year due to the better performances in all subcategories.
The central bank has hit back at the latest action by Moody's ratings to downgrade Sri Lanka's debt rating. In a communique issued yesterday, the central bank called the latest move irrational and said that it suspected A clear prejudice due to Moody's failure to consider recent moves to improve the country's cash flow injections in its assessment on Sri Lanka's repayment capacity.
The central bank has responded to rating agency Moody's downgrading of Sri Lanka's debt rating to CAA2 from CAA1 yesterday, that claims the country has failed to come up with a comprehensive debt repayment plan and warning of a default risk due to its low foreign exchange reserves. The central bank in a communique called Moody's ratings actions irrational, especially given the fact that it comes just days before the government announces its budget for next year. The central bank called it a clear example of hastiness, adding that views expressed by Moody's analysts during discussions with CBSL officials that the nature of the government's budget was irrelevant to its financing plans showed a lack of understanding on their part. It also accuses Moody's of having failed to take into account the latest developments following an array of measures implemented by the central bank and the government to strengthen the country's external position, some of which it says have already yielded the intended outcomes. Further, the bank says that Moody's assessment has failed to recognize the medium to long-term funding arrangements being finalized with bilateral sources that are expected to materialize in the near term. The failure of Moody's to consider these cash flow injections in any assessment on Sri Lanka's repayment capacity, the central bank says, exposes a clear prejudice. The bank also says that such downgrade is not unfamiliar to Sri Lanka, with Moody's having previously placed Sri Lanka on downgrade review in April 2020 at the outset of the pandemic, and after the government had signed a foreign currency term financing facility with a Chinese bank, which hindered the implementation of the arrangement and delayed fund receipts. Further, it says that Moody's did something similar in July this year, placing Sri Lanka under downgrade review when the central bank was in the process of finalizing a currency swap with the Bangladesh bank and was about to repay a maturing ISB. Such actions, the central bank says, lend suspicions to whether Moody's actions are only driven by economic considerations.
The Colombo benchmark all-share price index closed 25.08 points higher at 10,162.93, its all-time closing high. The S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks, meanwhile, gained 24.29 points to close at 3,711.85. Now here's Dimantha Matthew with a brief report on today's market performance.
We saw a bit of a slowdown in the market during the first few minutes of trading, and also during the first half of trading. We saw quite an amount of volatility in the index, where the index was moving between positives and negatives. However, after some time, we saw that the index coming back into the green territory with buying interest coming in strongly, and with it, the overall market ended up by about 25 points. So overall, we saw 10,162 was where the index closed at.
Meanwhile, in the currency market, the Sri Lankan rupee continues to remain at 202 rupees and 99 cents against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.